You know the story of Cinderella, right? That sweet girl, mistreated by her stepmother and stepsisters, who one day puts on a magic shoe, goes to the ball, wins the prince, and lives happily ever after. But what if I told you that none of that happened? What if that shoe wasn't a gift, but a living curse? What if the ball wasn't a party, but a silent ritual where time stops and evil chooses its next bride? I'll show you how it all started and why this curse may still be waiting for you. Have you ever noticed how certain things seem to wait, as if they knew the exact time to be found? The morning it all began, Cinderella was in the back garden, the one where no one else went, where the grass didn't grow and the wind always blew inwards. She wasn't looking for anything. She just wanted to escape from her stepmother's screams, the noise of the buckets, the routine of being invisible. That's when she tripped. The ground gave way a little, as if breathing. The earth was softer there, in a spot surrounded by dry roots and twisted rocks. She dug with her hands, staining her nails with an almost black brown. Soon her fingers touched something hard, like aged wood. A box. Small, covered in a fabric that must have been beautiful before. Now felt like dried skin. She pulled it out. The smell was strange, too warm for a cold morning. Cinderella hesitated, but the silence around her was so absolute that the sound of her breathing seemed too loud. Something inside her told her not to open it. But she was tired of listening to her intuition. She just wanted a distraction. Something pretty. Inside, there was a glass slipper. Perfect, smooth, no dirt, no cracks, as if it had been made that morning just for her. Beside it, a note aged by time, but still legible. Wear only when necessary. Never wish for love. Never wear both. She read it, reread it, and let out a small laugh. It was just a shoe. That was all. But when she put it on, she felt a slight twinge in her ankle, as if the shoe had bitten her or fitted too deeply. In the house, the wind stopped. A mirror cracked in the hallway on the second floor, and a whisper passed through the wall, so low that only someone who listened to silence all the time could hear it. Now it has begun. That night, Cinderella slept with the shoe still on her foot. It wasn't by choice. She simply forgot, as if her body no longer wanted to be separated from it, as if her foot itself had molded itself to the glass. But what she didn't realize, and perhaps never fully realized, is that it wasn't the shoe that was adapting to her. It was she who was beginning to adapt to the shoe. The hours passed slowly. The room, which had always seemed cold and musty, became stuffy. The windows wouldn't open, the walls sweated, and the silence was thick, as if something was leaning against the door, listening to her every breath. It was then that she whispered, not a wish, not really just a thought, the kind we let slip when we're exhausted. I wish someone would see me. A loose, half-muttered phrase. Alone in the dark, no one would hear, but someone did. The next morning, Cinderella woke up to screams. She ran downstairs. Her stepmother had fallen down the stairs. A bad, exposed fracture. Stifled screams. The whole house stopped. And then came the silence. The kind of silence that's scary, because it's the kind of silence that comes after tragedy. With her stepmother trapped in bed, the chores were divided among the sisters. For the first time in a long time, Cinderella was able to walk around the house, look out the window, sit for a few minutes. No one cursed her, no one pushed her, everyone saw her. And the shoe. It shone a little brighter that day, but it wasn't a reflection of the light. It was as if it pulsed, alive, as if it had been fed and enjoyed it. Cinderella didn't connect the dots. She didn't even try to remember what she had wished for. But in the living room, an old mirror shook by itself in the corner, and the crack that appeared in it seemed to smile. The following week, Cinderella went to the village market. The stepmother, still motionless in bed, told her daughters to do the shopping, but the sisters refused, saying that the smell of the street made them nauseous. Cinderella went alone, and For a moment, it felt like freedom. The walk to the market was long, and the shoe, still attached to her foot, made her limp slightly. But she didn't care. She was used to the pain. At least it was hers. The market was strangely silent. There was no music. The street musicians were gone. No smiles, no conversation, just quick glances and hushed whispers. And a woman, sitting in the corner of the market, covered with a faded blue shawl, her eyes hidden under a matching scarf. She wasn't selling anything. She was just watching. Cinderella tried to walk away quickly, but the woman grabbed her arm. Her fingers were thin and dry, but her strength was absurd. Her eyes, invisible beneath the scarf, seemed to pierce her soul, and then she spoke in a low, trembling voice, almost a choked whisper. "You're using him." Cinderella tried to pull her arm away, but the woman came closer and continued. "He listens, even when you dream. The first wish is free, the next one's charge, and he never forgets." Cinderella stepped back, frightened. No one seemed to notice what had just happened. And when she looked back at the corner where the woman was, she was no longer there. That night, Cinderella dreamed not of flowers, not of princes. She dreamed of eyes, hundreds of them, floating in a dark hall, all open, all looking at her, and everyone, with the reflection of her face inside the iris. She woke up with her heart racing, sweating, feeling her shoe tightening by itself. On the wall where the moonlight touched, the shadow of a woman slowly formed, standing with her back turned, with the other shoe in her hand. The morning after the dream in her eyes, the entire village woke up differently. The sky was gray, cloudless. The air seemed heavier, as if words had difficulty leaving the mouth. Even the church bells rang more slowly. That was the day the invitation arrived. A royal messenger, pale as chalk, knocked on the door. His eyes were sunken, his chin trembling. He said in a slurred voice, "The prince will give a ball to find his future wife. All the maidens in the kingdom are invited." The sisters screamed with excitement. They ran around the house, imagining dresses, jewelry, perfumes. Cinderella, quiet, just listened. Deep down, she knew she couldn't go. She had nothing, no dress, no shoes, except that one, the shoe. That night, she went to bed later than usual. And even without asking, even without wanting it, because now she avoided even thinking about the shoe, something happened. She woke up in the middle of the night to a sound. Tap, 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 like threads being sewn, like something being mended inside the walls. She walked to the old closet, the one no one used anymore, covered in dirty sheets and smelling of dust. She opened it. Inside was a dress, but it was no ordinary dress. It was made of a strange fabric that seemed to breathe, golden threads, braided with something that looked like human hair, and a strong, sickening smell, as if flesh had been sewn inside the lining. She didn't scream, she didn't run, she didn't question. She just touched the dress and felt that it was warm. Warm as the shoe, alive as the shoe. On the inside seam, a red line formed a word, hand-sewn. "Now he sees you." She stood there, still, her breathing slow, her heart almost silent, and deep in the closet, something breathed again. The carriage arrived uncalled. No one hired her, no one drove her, but she was there at the gate of the house exactly at midnight. Enveloped by a low mist that snaked around the wheels, Cinderella entered. The dress clung to her skin. The shoe tightened, as if it wanted to fuse itself to her bone once and for all. But she felt no pain. She felt anticipation. The castle appeared on the horizon, raised like a living shadow against the dark sky, flickering lights in the windows, soft music, and smiles that seemed frozen. When she entered, no one announced her, no one asked her name. Everyone just made room, as if they had already been waiting for her. People danced, but they didn't move much. They spun in circles, always following the same steps, like dolls trapped in a programmed dance. Cinderella walked among them and suddenly realized. No one blinked. Their eyes were wide open, staring, glazed. The prince approached, tall, handsome, impeccable, but his skin cold, pale. And when he took her hand, something in her screamed inside, as if she were touching a dead person. "You have the eyes of those who return," he whispered. The sentence didn't make sense, but it rang true. They danced, and the music seemed slower with each turn. The lights flickered, and the mirrors in the ballroom began to crack, one by one, without anyone reacting. In the shadows of the corner of the room, something was moving, something that seemed to be watching. In the background, a huge clock was marking time. The hands were shaking, and the sound, once elegant, began to grow serious, heavy, like the beating of a heart. Slowly dying, Cinderella squeezed the prince's hand. "When it's all over, will you still see me?" she asked. He just smiled, and his teeth were stained black. On the wall, a shadow stretched, and for a brief moment, she saw her reflection in the glass of the hall. She was dancing alone. The clock began to strike, 12 chimes, as in every story. But that night, each chime seemed to open a crack in the floor of the world. On the first, the chandeliers swayed. On the second, the walls shook. On the third beat, the music stopped, but no one noticed. All the guests continued to spin, smile, dance in silence. The orchestra no longer played. The musicians stood still, their eyes fixed, their bows suspended in the air. On the sixth beat, the central mirror of the hall exploded in silence. No sound, just shards flying slowly, as if time had slowed down. On the eighth beat, Cinderella looked at the prince. And he was bleeding from his eyes, from his nails, but he was still smiling. On the 10th beat, she wanted to run, but the shoe held her to the ground, drilled into the bone, warm as if it had roots. On the 11th beat, the floor of the hall began to breathe. Yes, breathe. It swelled, it shrank, as if the castle were alive, as if it were all a body. And they, just guests inside something that was awakening, and then came the last one. The 12th beat, long, long, long like a thunderclap that never ends. All the guests stopped dancing at once. They turned to Cinderella. Everyone, the entire ballroom. Their eyes were dark, empty, as if they could see right through her. The prince fell slowly, as if he had been dead for a long time. Silence. The shoe pressed so hard that Cinderella screamed, but no one moved. They just stared and smiled. The floor creaked. A crack ran up the wall, and high above, between the billowing curtains, something hung from the ceiling, something with eyes glowing in the dark, and a body that writhed like living smoke. Cinderella pulled her foot away forcefully. Blood spurted, but the shoe did not fall. It stayed there, glued to her, pulsing, like a heart separated from its body. She ran, or tried to, but the castle doors had disappeared. She looked back and saw that the guests were still there, but now. Closer, and all of them were wearing glass shoes. She managed to escape. No one knows how. Maybe she woke up in the middle of a nightmare, or maybe the castle allowed it. But what came home that morning was no longer the same Cinderella. Her steps left traces, not of dirt, but of blood. She arrived with her dress torn, her skin cold, her eyes fixed nowhere, and the shoe was still there, stuck in, as if it had been born with her. On the first night, she tried to rip it off by force. She pulled, she scratched, she burned. Nothing worked. The flesh around it began to change. It didn't heal, but it didn't rot either. So she tried to ignore it, but the shoe didn't want to be forgotten. It began to throb. At night, she heard a muffled sound, like a heart beating, inside the glass. Low, constant, as if the shoe had life, as if it was waiting for something. On the third night, Cinderella woke up with her toes bleeding, not from cuts, but from the inside out, as if the shoe was sucking them. She ran to the mirror and saw. In her eyes, there were reflections that weren't hers, faces, old ones, that cried inside the pupil. as if they were trapped there. She screamed, but no one heard. The house was empty, or maybe just deaf. Hours later, she found the note again, the one that came in, the box. But now, with new letters, written in something that was still dripping. It feeds on unspoken love. The more they look at you, the more it grows. You asked to be seen. Now, it wants to be seen. She looked at the shoe, and for the first time, she noticed something she had never noticed before. Inside, among the sparkles of the glass, there was an eye, open, and looking back, the sisters found Cinderella's behavior strange. She no longer hid. She walked around the house as if the space belonged to her. She spoke little, but when she did speak, her words seemed to weigh more than before, as if the air became dense after each sentence. They felt it. Something was wrong, but what really ignited the obsession was the shoe. It was impossible not to notice it. Shiny, alive, hypnotic, even with the flesh around her foot darkening, even with the smell of metal and blood. Even so, there was beauty in that object. And as always happens with desire, the gaze becomes necessity. On the third night after the ball, one of the sisters entered Cinderella's room. She was asleep, but the shoe seemed awake. It glowed in the dark. The sister approached, trembling. She whispered, "I just want to try it on." She tried to pull the shoe off, but at the same moment, something pushed her against the wall. No one saw it, but the scream woke the house. The next morning, she was found lying in the hallway with her eyes wide open and her mouth full of glass shards, as if she had bitten her own reflection. The other sister went crazy. She began to walk around the house, whispering to the mirrors. She had fits of laughter alone. Then I cried for hours, looking at the closet where the dress appeared. "He hears me now," she said. "He wants me to dance." One morning, Cinderella found her in the attic, spinning around alone with her bare feet. Her heels were torn, the floor was bloody. She was humming a song that no one had ever taught her, a melody that sounded like the sound of midnight. Cinderella didn't try to help her. She just watched, as if she knew that it was inevitable, as if the shoe had chosen it. And in the reflection of the window, she saw something for an instant. The two sisters were dancing, but their bodies weren't theirs, and their feet. They were both wearing glass slippers. The invitation arrived a few days later, written on dark paper, with gold letters that changed shape in the light, but no one delivered it. It was just on Cinderella's bed. "The prince is waiting for you. Bring what's yours." She didn't hesitate. She put on the same dress. The fabric now seemed lighter and warmer, as if it had grown accustomed to her body. The shoe? It never came off again. She didn't even try. Now it was part of her. The carriage arrived without wheels. It glided along the road as if it were floating, and the sky, for the first time in days, was completely clear, but the blue was dead. There were no musicians in the castle. There were no guests, only shadows sitting on chairs like faded figures in an old painting. And among them, on the altar, the prince, standing motionless. His eyes were dull, like worn marble, but he smiled when she approached and whispered, "You brought me back." Cinderella looked around. Everything was silent. No one was breathing, not even her. The priest was a hooded figure. The long, thin fingers. The voice wasn't human. "Do you accept each other in body, blood, and eternity?" She said yes, without thinking, without wanting to, as if the answer was already engraved in her, even before the question. When he touched her hand, the prince trembled, and then he put his hand in his own chest, slowly, without pain, as if he were opening a book. "Here is my heart. Keep it with me, forever." And he fell. The blood ran down to her feet, and the shoe absorbed it, drank every drop. As if she had been thirsty for centuries, Cinderella didn't cry. She just smiled, and she stayed there, at the altar, with the prince's body at her feet, and absolute silence around her. The entire castle breathed with her and From the ceiling, where there had been stained glass, there was now a huge mirror, showing the ceremony as it really was. In the reflection, Cinderella was alone, marrying emptiness, and in place of the prince, the shoe. The castle was empty. No one spoke of the ball anymore, about the new queen, about the prince. It was as if everything had been erased from the kingdom's memory, like a dream forgotten. Upon waking, time passed. The flowers did not bloom that spring, the river dried up for an entire day, and the church bells rang alone at midnight. But no one remembered why, except for one child. In a distant village, where the clouds seemed lower and the birds avoid landing, a little girl played alone in the yard of her grandmother's house. Near the well, there was a crooked tree. Its branches grew deep into the earth, and there, between roots opened by the last rain, something shone. The girl dug, curious, slowly, not knowing what she was looking for, until she found the box, old moldy, but still closed with that dark fabric. That seemed to breathe. She opened it, and there it was. The second shoe, perfect, untouched, as if it had been waiting, as if it knew she would come. There was no dress, there was no invitation, just the object and a note, written in shaky letters, wet, living. The first always calls the second, and when the two are together, she comes back. The girl put it on. The shoe fit perfectly. As if it had been made to measure, she laughed softly. And at that moment, somewhere far away, a mirror cracked. The crack formed a smile, and behind it, someone woke up. The story ends here, but only for now, because now. The other shoe has also found a foot, and the world once again will forget what it shouldn't. Now tell me, after everything you've heard, would you still have the courage to put on that shoe? The Cinderella story they told you was just a curtain behind it. There was an ancient ritual, a hungry entity, and a shoe waiting for the next foot. And the scariest thing is that this curse never ends. It only changes its form, its name, its address. Maybe right now, it's closer than you think. Maybe it's in your grandmother's attic, in the corner of a forgotten thrift store, or in some object in your house that you never understood why you still keep. So, pay attention, because the second shoe has already been put on, and when the two are together, she comes back.